Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy. I am your friendly neighborhood therapist, Jeremy Schumacher, licensed marriage and family therapist. And 2 weeks in a row, I'm having guests. You can tell the summer is ending because I'm back to my regular schedule. Another special guest, mental health adjacent, I would say, more in the journalism and more on the journalism side of things. But we'll get into that. I am joined today by Dhyana Levey.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me on.
I'm excited to chat with you. Dhyana and I have known each other for like a year-ish?
A year. Yeah, about a year, I would say.
About a year. Through the Rights and Religious Forum, part of the cohort for the next year and the past year. Working with religious trauma survivors. But Dhyana, do you want to introduce yourself real quick beyond just how I know you?
Yeah. I struggle to define myself, actually, but my original definition would be journalist. My first job was as a newspaper reporter, so like local news, and also then freelance for magazines, but newspapers, mostly print. And then I got into podcasting. I had a podcast or have a podcast. I just haven't released any new episodes lately, called Generation Cult. Yeah, it's still there. It's still there. Called Generation Cult, where I interviewed other people who grew up in controlling primarily religious organizations. And now I am working on a project through this fellowship that we're doing connected to the Rights and Religions Forum. And mine does focus on media, and it's to help people who are getting out of these controlling religious organizations kind of navigate the media landscape.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I think is super important at all times, but especially with like fascism on the rise and specifically Christian nationalist bend to the government here in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a really scary time. I mean, I think it's always been tricky to put yourself out there. There are always things that can go wrong when you're, doing an interview or anything. And there's always like an aspect of control you give up when you are talking to a media outlet. Chances are someone doesn't want to do your story wrong, but like it does happen. Nobody wants to be misrepresented. But now things have gotten a little bit more shaky and intense. And I think there's still amazing journalists and content creators out there who, will put out your story and put out some great information, but like people still need to be careful. And I don't know. I want to help.
Yes, you keep making a face like you're like, and they're not always careful.
I know. Yeah. I mean, there's always been issues, but yeah, I do. Sometimes I struggle with it because it's like I do encourage people. Like I want more people to know about what happens in insulated religious groups or cults or whatever you want to call them. I think the more people who know what happens, the better. And how do you get your information? I mean, you get it from the media, whether you like it or not, like you get it from these mainstream outlets, you get it from these different ways. And, for good or bad, you gotta work with what you have. As flawed as it can be and as not great as things are now, it's still what you have. So just make it a little easier.
Yeah. Well, and I think some guidelines and some steps for people are super helpful. And there's a difference between going on a low-key chill podcast and like doing an actual media interview or being part of a documentary. Like the amount of editing and shaping of a story that can happen is very different depending on the medium.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the top things I tell people is like, who are you talking to? You know, like you can't control the outcome, but you can do research before and
Yeah.
see, you know, what is the media outlet? What has the person done before? You know, is the filmmaker, you know, a journalist? Is it someone who's doing research and using sensitivity, you know, or is it someone who's just doing these like quick hit, like overly dramatic things that it, you know, that you probably aren't going to feel comfortable with. Like there are things you
Yeah.
can do to prepare.
Yeah. From your perspective, mine might be a little different from the therapy side of things. I mean, has, how do I want to ask this? Has religion and or specifically like insular groups, like cults as we would call them, has that ever been reported on particularly well? I grew up in the satanic panic. That's sort of as far back as I go. And like, yeah, media's kind of always gotten that wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it's been reported on particularly well. And I mean, you know, I'm a big supporter of free press and the First Amendment. And, you know, I married another journalist. I mean, he's an attorney now. A lot of my friends are still journalists. So I'll, you know, defend journalism. However, as someone
Yeah.
who also grew up in a cult, I grew up in a small kind of new agey commune thing. I don't feel like this topic has been covered well by any stretch. And
Yeah.
that's my other driving factor. I think that if there was more understanding by, you know, just the general public, but also, you know, in the media, that
Yeah.
maybe it could be covered better.
Yeah.
So it goes both
Yeah.
ways. You know, like
Yeah.
people could understand how the media works better. And then also maybe, you know, if
The media.
somebody's
Yeah.
going to interview someone, you know, maybe they might know a little bit more about how to deal with this vulnerable source. Like that's one thing on this site I'm developing. You know, we talk about vulnerable sources, someone who has left one of these insular religious groups, chances are they should be considered a vulnerable source. They've been through something and should
Yeah.
be treated as such.
Right. Right. What has in your perspective, what have you sort of seen shift in like the landscape of journalism with cults reporting from like Shiny Happy People or like Wild Wild Country, some of those first really big, really popular cult documentaries? Has that shifted? Did that create like an interest in some of this stuff?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely been an explosion of interest in cult stuff, cult documentaries. And I mean, I think generally it's positive in the sense that more people are interested. Like they understand that, like they see that these things are happening. It's less of like
Yeah.
there are no more cults. Like you still hear that, like cults don't exist. And no, of course they do. Like,
Right.
you know, like at
Yeah.
least people know. But you know, however, like some of these some of it is just crap. Like some of it's awful. Like I'll watch it and be like, no, oh my God, you know,
Yeah.
um and so like, well, I think overall it's good that it's getting more into the mainstream. Like people are like, okay, I kind of know a little bit more about how some of these groups work.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a disservice being done when it's reported on wrong, or you know, someone's really personal story is covered in an incredibly shallow way. Like that's awful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's there's a weird, I view it as sort of a rubber band thing where like it's great that people are more aware of this stuff, and some things that serve to like sensationalize it, and focus on like every cult is weird about sex or whatever, right? Like the ones that are really chasing that sensational aspect of coercive control, I think miss the harm that's done, and that allows something like Christian nationalism. Like I've seen what is his name? I can see his beady little eyes and I'm drawing a blank on his name. Pete Hegseth's I can tell you Moscow, Idaho. I know where his church is. I just can't think of his name. But like some of those Christian nationalist thinkers and some of those people who have been normalized in a way because it seems like regular Christianity, even though it's deeply coercive and there's a high degree of control, because it's not overtly weird, or it's not on a compound, or they're not all wearing the same clothes. I think sometimes then people dismiss it because they're looking for a cult looks like this, and that doesn't present this way. So there's like there's a raising of awareness on the one hand, but then almost sometimes like it almost becomes a trope depending on how it's reported.
No, that's so true. Yeah, I mean, it's more recognized, but then, yeah, at the same time, more pigeonholed in some ways. I mean, I think you're always gonna get people who misunderstand something as complex as cults. I mean, it's always going to be kind of misunderstood to a certain extent, but I think we can do better to like, address the complexities, especially, and I think one way to do it is to, I don't know, probably feature more about the specific people who have experienced the group. One thing is like, I know everyone loves to hear about the weird cult leader. I know it's more entertaining to hear about the weird guy who took all the money and had sex with all the people. Like, I know people are entertained by that, but it's like, that's like, I really don't feel like that's the story a lot of it. I mean, I know it's more exciting from a true crime perspective, but like, the kind of documentaries, the kind of things that I find really informative are the ones that really like go deep and like really talk to the people about like, okay, what did it mean to you? Like, why, either you grew up in it, or like what attracted you to this, or like, or you were born like me and you, like we were born. Like, that's how we joined our groups. We just were born, like, what about that? And then like, what were these aspects? No, it wasn't all bad, but like, what were the things that we, what are we struggling with now? Like, I think that's fascinating. And I don't think I'm the only one. I mean, obviously you have to address the leader, or sometimes there's not a leader, but like, I just, I think it's gotten almost tiring to just focus on this general, like, okay, here's the cult leader, and like, okay, everything's bad. I mean, I don't know. There's just more people can do.
It's interesting that you bring up true crime, because it reminds me of like the way that serial killers are talked about. And that like if you make something about Dahmer, that's the hook, and people are going to tune in. I'm from Wisconsin, so I don't want to say local celebrity. That sounds bad, but I grew up about 10 minutes away from where Dahmer first killed someone. And it's one of those things where like there's that sort of macabre fascination. People want to know about the abuse, who stole the money, who had sex with who, and that like totally misses the people who are hurt by it. And when we talk about serial killers, like we very rarely center victims. It's this big personality, the weirdness of it is what makes people sort of tune in. Yeah,
it's true. And like, at the same time, I'm not saying that you should dismiss that. Like, and that's one thing I do when I'm working with people who are getting ready to do an interview, because you can't deny reality. Like, the outlet or whatever, they want people to read the story, they want people to watch the documentary, and like, yeah, they do want to know about these certain aspects. So like, it's not like it's going to get left out, it's going to be addressed. So you have to accept that. But at the same time, like, like, let's encourage, these other aspects that could be really interesting as well, and I think serve everybody to learn more about.
Well, and I can use a phrase like coercive control, and I know that you know what that means. But again, I don't know that gets used in many of these cult documentaries. It's almost always this like magnetic. Cults are often presented as cults of personality, which is why they center the leader so often. Like, this magnetic figure drew people in, instead of like, oh no, there are all these mechanisms and structures in place to coerce people and to limit their actual choice into leaving the cult or deciding to not join.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. Like people get themselves into positions where like they don't have the money to leave, or that they're not able to for certain reasons, or it just, there's so many different complex reasons for what they do. And it just, people have a tendency to simplify, and then they make themselves feel better by separating themselves. Oh, that would never happen to me. And
Yeah.
it's kind of unfair. So I don't
Yeah,
know.
and unrealistic, because again, like that's
Yeah,
not, it's a thing. We all have cognitive biases, and we're all of our brains are susceptible to them. Like you have to actively work against it. It's not that only silly people join cults. It's that like
no,
there's a meeting of variables that make it really likely that somebody will join a cult.
exactly. And like quite the contrary, actually, like from what
Mhm.
I've heard, like cults, like they like idealistic people who like want to do good and are
Yeah,
intelligent. And, this trope that it's like dumb people or whatever it is that people
yeah,
say, like it's not true. So like if somebody
right.
actually wants to learn more about cults, they should do it in a realistic way. And I think that there are just better ways to learn about them than what we have. That said, I think that I've also managed to irritate some people in the cult recovery space by defending journalism and media, because the thing is that like, it doesn't exist to support survivors. I mean, it's there, but it's
Yeah,
not, it doesn't, one part of my presentations that people really don't like is that like the media doesn't work for you. Like it's there to like provide information to the public. And so, if you're working with someone, like they're reporting to their editor or their, whoever is putting on the documentary or whatever. So like, I'm not saying they don't care about you, but like that's something to think about.
yeah,
So when I'm talking to people, like I want them to be aware that there is more going on than, just you talking about your story. And I know that doesn't sound very nice, but it's really something to keep in mind if you're going to do it.
yeah, yeah.
And if that sounds terrible, then don't do it. Don't do the interview.
Well, yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to think of The Mortician, I think, was the name of a HBO documentary, not about a cult, about a mortician, about a guy who ran a funeral service very unethically. And it's a fascinating watch because he's such a villain. And it's very fascinating to watch the interview process and be like, why did he agree to do this? He looks like an awful person. And you're sort of watching it where like he's telling his side of the story. It looks like he's telling his side of the story. I'm sure that's what he thought he was doing. But I think that's a good example, not in the cult space where it's like, yeah, once that recording is done, they're going to edit it and they're going to show it a certain way. And if you haven't done any due diligence beforehand, you might come out looking a way that you're not very happy with.
Yeah, that happens all the time. Yeah.
And you've interviewed a ton of survivors. I've interviewed a ton of survivors. I think it's really it's your life story. It's the biggest thing that's ever happened to you. Even if it's not a major media outlet, sometimes your story just becomes content. And like that can be really unrewarding, even if it's not spliced or edited in a weird way. Sometimes you want it to do something and it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even my podcast, Generation Cult, I edit heavily. Like
Yeah.
I care deeply about the people whose stories I've had on Generation Cult. But at the same time, I also really care about having a consistent story that you can listen to that's shorter. And so
Yeah.
I cut a lot out. And in the same way that when I would write newspaper articles, I would have to cut a lot out and people would be mad that I interviewed them and I didn't put the whole interview in. And that happens
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
And before I would interview people for Generation Call, I would tell them I'm working the way I did as a reporter, and like, this is going to be cut. And like, if you can't, confirm certain things or certain accusations or whatever, like, I'm not including this. And there are certain people that like, I don't come on my show if it's too sketchy, or like there are just certain things. And it's like, I'm sorry if that's not going to work out.
Yeah.
But it just, that was just kind of the way to do, I felt comfortable doing things. And I get it. Like, I get that isn't necessarily the way someone might want to do things. And so and people have not wanted to come on, and I totally get it. And I mean, honestly, I think people should apply that to any interview they do. Like, yeah, just say no. Like, then don't do it. Like, like I don't mean you any wrong, but like, yeah, I could cut out something that you think is relevant, or you don't know. Like, you don't necessarily have control over it in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, if you are a survivor, might feel really scary because you're coming out of a situation where you also didn't have a lot of control.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's even more nerve-wracking, I can imagine. And like, I mean, I get freaked out too. Like, I don't do very many interviews myself. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm more used to interviewing people. Like, I feel weird about being interviewed. And I've had things where I've been, misquoted, and I've been like, oh. So like, I get it. Like, I totally get it. Like, I get all weirded out myself. So I get it. But like, also at the same time, I just think that there are things people can be more prepared for. And I think it does everyone a service to be prepared. And I really want people to share their stories, because I really think, more understanding.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I think disclosure is helpful. I think people making informed decision is helpful. Like, the more information we can present to them, the better we are to avoid our cognitive biases, avoid confirmation, like all the things all the shortcuts our brain wants to take. If we're well informed, it gets harder to take those. So I think disclosure, and I think talking about people's stories are super helpful. And people have emotional reaction to being interviewed. People have an emotional reaction to their stuff going public. Like, it's not all benefit and no risk.
Oh, totally. I mean, I even tell people, like, I need to go, like, anytime I do an interview, or like, I mean, I give public presentations at conferences and stuff. Like, I need to go sit in a room and stare at a wall afterwards. like every, and I'm an extrovert. Like, I mean, people need to do things to, it puts you through something. It's not all, happiness and light. Like, even if you like this sort of thing. So it's just,
how many, this is a hard left turn. How many cult documentaries do you watch?
Oh my God, I have no idea. I just
like, do you? I'll ask a better question. Do you like keep tabs on the new ones that come out?
Of course, especially the ones. Yeah, and like, I'm fortunate enough to know several of the people who have been in them over the last couple of years, so that's kind of fun. I'll call my teenager and be like, "Come look, this, my friend's on this," and he's like not impressed at all. Like,
no, they never are.
No, not impressed in the least. Like, I don't want to see but especially if I know the person, if I've heard it's a good one, I'll watch it. If I've heard it's a terrible one, I'll watch it just, to be like, oh my God, that was terrible. And there's so many. God, I don't know if I could even count.
I find I watch, quantify it. I find I watch a lot less than I used to. And I don't know. I think it's the proliferation of them. I sort of, like you, require more than just a hook of like a new cult documentary came out. And my clients, especially people who know me and I know them very well, but they don't maybe know me as a person, are like, oh, did you see this? Or did you see that? Like, I don't watch them. It's my work. It's what I do day in and day out. It's not what I necessarily choose to do with my free time, unless someone says like, hey, this one's really good, or it's one that I'm totally unfamiliar with, is more likely, because a lot of them are, I think Shiny Happy People was a different level of success. And then I feel like a lot of what came out after that was chasing the success more than it was more than it had good information. Yeah, I think that happened a lot. That said, I mean, there have been
some really good ones in that category.
Yeah.
I think Trust Me, The False Prophet is great. That came out recently. I think that's a really good documentary.
Yeah.
I think there are still some really good ones coming out. But yeah, there are also ones that are just like, okay, so you're just kind of putting this out because cults,
Right.
that okay. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
again, like I do appreciate, I do appreciate though that the subject matter is getting out there. I do.
Yeah.
I don't want to discourage that.
Yeah. You just want people to take their time and do their due diligence with it.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. When you're watching something like that, are you watching it? This is also a bad question. Do you watch it more as a journalist, or are you watching it more as a survivor? And maybe that question doesn't make sense. That makes sense in my brain. Like, I guess I'm curious, like, if your brain even operates that way.
I don't know. I mean, it's weird. My relationship with me being like, I would love to call myself a journalist still, but I have a hard time because I consider myself more of an activist than a journalist at this point because I'm so entrenched in like the cult survivor community. I do a lot of work with that. I have a very clear opinion. And when I worked in journalism, it was like as a news reporter. So I just feel like this very big divide. I mean, I have background in it. I feel like I think like one. And like, I'm very judgmental of movies and things about journalists. And like, if I read a story that I think is crappy, I'm like, this is horrible. Like, what is this person's problem? Like, I definitely have an attitude, but, and then stuff like I never worked in documentary film or anything like that, but I do know some people who have, and like, I love documentaries. I love TV. So I think mostly when I'm watching something like that, I am watching it as someone who like A, loves TV and documentaries, and also B, kind of as a survivor. Like, does this do the person and the topic justice? So probably from like a person who wants to learn about the subject and also just, I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but like wants to get something out of the program.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, especially with like working with religious trauma, that's the part that's hard. It feels like work for me, which is why I think I watch far fewer of them than people expect. Because like my brain's just doing like assessments and like connecting dots and doing sort of all the therapy thing of like, this is what question I wish would have gotten asked there. And like, it's not a therapy documentary. So I have a hard time turning my brain off in like my professional lens and just either get into a place of enjoyment or even like looking at it as a survivor. It's my therapy brain for that stuff's really strong.
Yeah. Well, I do that more these days too, as I have, met more with survivors. I did go back to school and get a psychology degree, although I don't, I'm not a mental health professional, but so I do think more, I think, when I watch these things like, well, what was that person thinking? Like, I think I do think through in a different way than I did when I was like reporting on things when I feel like my brain has changed a little bit than, it was before. But yeah, it's not, I don't know. I probably don't have the same relationship that you do to that. It's not my.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it's when we're consuming these things for entertainment, but we have a professional lens, it just hits different. And I think your background, but then also how you're talking like your brain changing is like a good thing. That's what we want. Or it would be lovely if reporters, journalists, documentary filmmakers had some of the like background and awareness. Like when I see a documentary that has Dhyana Levey in, I'm like, oh, that's probably good because like, hey, somebody who knows what they're talking about is filling that expertise role and explaining some of the dynamics that happen.
I love Dhyana. She's great. Yeah. Yeah. I'm always
Yeah,
happy to see her on stuff.
yeah. And again, it's she's not super online. She's not an influencer. She like, has just studied this stuff and written a ton of really good books. And it brings that like professional lens to the analysis instead of just like, ooh, Netflix threw a bunch of money at this filmmaker to make a cult documentary.
Yeah. No, that's true. Like I definitely think a little higher of the documentaries or whatever articles when they have, there's a quote from her or, certain other people. I'm like, okay, at least this person knew enough to talk to somebody who knows what they're
Who knows?
talking about,
Right.
and she usually has really good insight. I mean, I know I go to her for stuff myself. I've had her on my show
Yeah.
a couple times. I had a live show in San Francisco and she was on it. Yeah, no, she's a very good source of information on all of this stuff.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it is, I don't know, I don't want to throw shade at people. I agree with you. It's that nuance of like, it's important for people to be able to tell their story. And there's like the weird influencer culture around chasing numbers, or you have a lot of Instagram followers, so you should write a book. And then I'm working with people in my office on a regular basis who are like, oh, well, I saw this person talk about it, so I got their book. And then their book isn't helpful because it's either just a straight memoir or like it doesn't connect to any sort of larger picture.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I've seen that.
I just think that's lacking for a lot of survivors who come across people who have big followings, but like aren't necessarily drawing the parallels to hierarchies and power imbalances and coercive control. Like, it's write your memoir. I'm not throwing shade at anybody who's written a memoir, but like survivors, I think, are so desperate for resources. They're going to those things expecting it to be helpful. And oftentimes they're not.
Yeah.
They're interesting.
Yeah, depending. I mean, so, know, sometimes, because like I've read a lot of memoirs, and sometimes it helps in the sense that you might relate to something that somebody went through. But yeah, I mean, I kind of went through something similar when I first like stepped into, I don't know, cult world or whatever. I just completely ignored my upbringing. And then I thought I was going to go write a memoir. Like I went and researched the group I was raised in. And I was like, well, and I was being pushed in the direction, like write a book, and I started doing research. I started like interviewing people, and I actually started trying to write a memoir, and it didn't come together. And I didn't end up, I mean, I have all this information. I'm still maybe going to do something with it, but it didn't come together. I didn't have a lot to say. And what ended up happening was I ended up becoming really connected to the idea of people raised in these groups and how interesting that was. And like, what happened to my friends and I, and then like researching more, and I want to learn more. And then I, went back to school, and then, I had my podcast. And so I like went off on this whole other tangent, and I always kind of felt a little bit like a failure because I like never wrote that book that I told people I was going to write. But at the same time, I don't feel like what I had was useful, but I did produce something that like I think was useful to people. And like I continue to do stuff that maybe isn't as visible, but like I think that, it does something. It can be helpful, and maybe one day,
Well, and I think again that self-awareness is really important, and influencer culture is like a new and sort of ever-shifting thing. I'm not that it didn't exist. Again, like Oprah jumping on the satanic panic is what made it a thing.
Ugh.
Like,
that started on Oprah.
But it's so that's been there, but the push now, I mean, even just like in modern publishing, like certain publishers won't take a look at you unless you have X number of Instagram followers, which is like not a metric that used to exist. So it's very interesting. And then I think, again, sometimes people get like in my world, a lot of evangelicals will leave the church and still maintain a really big following. And they basically are running a church still, that it's just not whatever sect or religion they were. Like now they have a podcast, now they're going to write a book, and they're doing all the things that they would have done as a pastor or a worship leader. They're just doing it outside of the church. And that like that self-analysis, that awareness of like power structures and hierarchies doesn't happen. Like that's probably the thing that drives me the most batty about survivor spaces. Like, oh, that person is still just operating like a leader.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough either, is as great as survivor spaces are, and I really do think there needs to be more access to them, and I think they're incredibly helpful. I think that there's also a lot of problems within those spaces too, and I think you have a lot of people who are working out unresolved trauma and kind of like, I don't know, falling into these roles that they were either in before, or I'm not sure what was happening. You know, again, I'm not a mental health professional, but like they end up, you know, wanting to lead, or you know, there's these power dynamics, and I've seen many support groups or you know what have you, like completely implode because of these sorts of dynamics, and people get really traumatized. Like they came for help and then they had this experience, you know, and they never come back to a survivor space again. Like that's too bad, because good ones can be really, really good.
Yeah. How did you navigate that, having your podcast?
Navigate what?
The pull to be a leader or a thought leader, or
well, I never thought of myself that way. I mean, you know, as a journalist, I always just thought of myself as someone who helps people, you know, bring information, and I thought of myself the same way with the podcast. When I did the podcast, kind of in the back of my head, it was like, oh, well, maybe I can, you know, get good at this and maybe like get a job in radio, you know. KQED wasn't interested, by the way. But but anyway, like that was kind of my headspace. So it wasn't anything about being a leader. It was just like, okay, here I am interviewing people. Like I'm here to bring information. And so my focus was, like, how can I do this person's story justice? Like I want to get across like these themes. First of all, like what are the themes? You know, what are these different themes coming across? Is it, you know, is it Christian nationalism? Is it, you know, you know, families? Is it, you know, what is it? Like, what's this kind of overall thing? And then, you know, I also talked to the person beforehand, like what is important to them, you know, since it's an independent podcast, I can't, you know, I had a lot of freedom. And then I edit. So like I had a lot of things that I was thinking about that I wanted for the end product. I don't know. It's never been about me. Like nothing's ever, it's never about me. So I don't think I ever, and that's one reason I think I had such a hard time trying to write a memoir. I was just like, ew. Like, it's not about me. So I just,
I find that as well. I don't mind telling my story, and I don't mind guesting on people's podcasts that way, but like, it's when you're doing it to be helpful to other people is different than when you're chasing sort of your metrics or your follower number or how many likes and subscribes you're getting. Like and I don't think people wake up and start that way, but I do think they certainly fall into that trap of like chasing the metrics and like, ooh, I had a viral moment, so now it's a thing. And you can certainly lose sight of what is designed to be like a helpful space.
Totally. And I'm not going to say I don't get excited if like I've had posts go viral, and like I've also written stories and like had episodes that were popular, and I get excited. I'm like, yay,
for sure.
You know, but it doesn't define me. And that's not really my goal when I put something out. Like I'm mostly just worried that it's accurate, and that, you know, is this accurate? Is this,
Yeah.
Does this represent the person? Does it, is this right? Is this
Yeah.
fair? Like, those are the things that keep me up at night. Like, I don't know, like, as far as how I sound or look, like, I don't know, like, I always sound kind of weird. So whatever.
People do ask me if I listen to podcasts. I'm like, no, I hate my voice. Like, why would I listen to it?
Oh yeah. I just cringe. I cringe the entire time I hear
Yeah.
myself. So yeah, maybe that's part of it. I don't really think that highly of what I look or sound like. So
Yeah.
I don't
It is.
I don't put too much into it.
It is a proven scientific fact. People don't like to hear their recorded voices. It does a
I've heard
weird
that.
thing in our brain where we're used to hearing our voice project from inside, and then hearing it through our ears bothers us. Like, it's a real phenomenon. But I do think, again, like, centering survivors and also trying to do something helpful is different than getting podcast famous.
Yeah. And what is that podcast famous, really?
For the podcast listener, Dhyana just made such a face when I said podcast. Oh yeah, what is that? Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't motivate me either. So we're just reminiscing about trying to be helpful, I guess, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
What have you sort of seen change? For survivors, I'm always curious, like, since you left your group, what have you sort of seen survivor spaces? What sort of changes have you noticed? What sort of things do you see now that you didn't see when you first got out?
I mean, just the existence of survivor spaces. I mean, part of it was that, it really wasn't on my radar when I left. I didn't even use the word cult or anything. I mean, it was kind of thrown around in my group, just like, haha, maybe this, but it was like, ew, you don't want to use that word. I'm perfectly fine with that word now. Call it what it is. I didn't really think about it. There may have been other survivor spaces that I didn't know about, but I think there's more awareness. I think that people are more educated about coercive control, even if they don't call it coercive control. I do think there's more out there, more access, even though it's limited. So that's a positive.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's, I see a lot more people who are like dipping their toes in deconstruction or leaving spaces while they're still in their group, instead of just finding it after they've already left, which I think is great. Like, I think that is super helpful
great
to know that those landing places are out there before you leave.
Yeah, because that's hard. It's really hard you're still in, to do that work. I mean, I know a lot of people are, they're mentally out, but still in. That can start there. But a lot of the times, you don't know if someone's in. So if you have something waiting for you on the outside, that's great.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've noticed this. I notice I call them cohorts now. There are cohorts of people who leave. There are cohorts of people who like listen to a podcast, and then usually within 3 years, the podcast stops existing because people move on to other things in their careers. Like, a lot of times that space where leaving is the most important thing, deconstructing is the most important thing, recovery is the most important thing, like, people grow out of that and move on in their lives. And so I see these sort of cohorts around, they all listen to this podcast, or they're all in this Facebook group or this Discord chat or whatever it was. And then like they almost go through a secondary loss on like, well, that community is dissipating now. People aren't posting as much, or the podcast isn't a thing anymore, which I think looks different, because what we both notice is good. There's a lot more of those spaces now, but there's growth, and then there's sort of like people grow out of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's great. People grow and change, and and sometimes they do kind of come back to things. I mean, it's not always linear, right?
Right. But it is it is interesting talking to, I don't want to call them old heads. People who have been out for longer will say, oh, did you listen to this podcast? And somebody who's just going to be like, I don't think that's the thing anymore.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, I've been out long enough where like I remember some of the things that I first found when I first left that aren't a thing anymore.
Yeah. Or it's interesting depending on somebody's process in leaving. Because for me, like, I technically, I guess, left when I was 18 and I moved out of the house, but I didn't even think about it for decades, basically. So I didn't actually start doing any work or, anything until for a very long time. So I had been out for a really long time. So, I mean, I assumed that affected me differently. And then after a while of, getting to know the, I guess, survivor spaces and information there, I feel like I grew and moved on, but that put me in a different space than someone who maybe had just left and then entered those spaces. It's just interesting at what point you get into them.
Yeah. And I love's the wrong word. I continually find it fascinating how even different life stages, developmental stages that people leave in, the different specifics of their story, how much people's stories overlap. Different groups, different geographic places, different dogma, and like it's there's so much similarity in spite of those differences.
Yeah, that was one of the driving factors behind me doing my podcast, was that, I mean, I really wanted to feature people who had grown up in these groups, because at the time when I started it was, I think, 2018, there wasn't really anything focusing on people who were born and raised. But another reason I wanted to do it was because I had already spent so much time just chatting with people like who had come from all these different groups, just wide variety of groups. And everyone had these like incredibly similar stories. And it didn't matter if they came from like a Christian-based group or an Eastern group, or, people were connecting. And that was just this thing that I found. And so that was another reason I wanted to have that, was just to be like, if you listen through, you hear these similarities come up again and again and again. And I mean, it's basically the coercive nature, right? Like the way people are coerced into complying or staying, it's very similar. And it's definitely something that I think people are looking at more, but should look at even more.
There's still just a real lack of research. Again, there's a difference between writing a memoir and having peer-reviewed research, and it's one of the things that the field is still really behind on, is any sort of cohesive research, because so much of it ends up being qualitative instead of quantitative, focused on the story, which is meaningful and matters, but we're still missing a lot of the metrics and the measurables for some of these things, which a ton of people are working on, right? I'm not saying it's not being worked on. It's just one of the first peer-reviewed papers on religious trauma was published in 2023. We just don't have the scientific approach to it yet. And I think that's one of the things that is a real bummer about our modern fascism, is cutting funding to stuff like that for political reasons. But again, it's why some of this stuff is so important for people to get their stories out, and then for professionals to be able to research and connect some of these dots, because that narrative of like a bad apple exists, and that's not true. There's these connective threads to all these different groups.
And I think that they're also relevant to the fascism that we're seeing. I think
for sure.
It's not just, people want to put these groups in this, oh, that's just some weird group. It's like, no, these dynamics exist, in all these spaces. I think this is relevant, I mean, not to sound I don't know, but you can see it in a lot of these things. So I just feel like it should be studied more widely.
I refer to MAGA as a cult. Like, yeah.
Oh, me
like
too. Yeah.
The dynamics are all there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not all the markers exist.
People want to put certain labels on things to require them to be a cult, to like put them in, but like they're, I mean, I do kind of feel like it is kind of a spectrum. Like there are certain coercive aspects, there are certain things that make a group unhealthy, but like it doesn't have to have this one leader, it doesn't have to have this specific thing, like it doesn't have to check off these certain boxes, and like it has all these certain problems. So
well, and it's this is going to be a longer tangent than I meant for it to be, but it's also interesting because modern cults look different. Again, we're not seeing, not that they don't exist, but we're not seeing, a compound. We're not seeing somebody buy up land and start their preferred utopia. We're seeing things grow online. We're seeing things where people have never met a leader, don't know there's a hierarchy, and are still getting pulled into it.
And there's tons of like little family cults, like tons of ones you've never heard of, like little, people try to say that's not, it is just because you've never heard of it. And it's just this little family living over there. Like that doesn't make it not a cult, like people always want to, it's just because it's not this big commune over here. There's just so many, I don't know, definitions or so many aspects that can make it fall into that category that I think should be considered.
Yeah. And those of us who like work in the fields, right, like we talk about the continuum of control, like it is a spectrum there. It's not this marker exists, therefore it can't. Like there's putting some of these criteria into context is how we can make those determinations. There are absolutely families that mirror the control that a cult that has a compound is going to mirror. Like it doesn't need to be that dynamic of charismatic leader and everybody dresses in maroon robes. Like that's not what being a cult ever meant. That's just what got the headlines.
Yeah, exactly. Or like even like some seemingly mainstream church someone went to, like people will be like, well, that seems high pressure, like, but we can't call it a cult. And it's like, well, I mean, just because it doesn't have the official title of cult on it doesn't mean it wasn't coercive. It doesn't mean that, there weren't any human rights violations, or like it depends on what happened. Like it's all dependent on what happened within it, like what happened to the people. Like, people, it just like, you can't be that dependent on these black and white labels. It's like, what happened in the group? Like even if it was a book club, like what happened to the people in it? Like what did it cost them to leave? That's what you need to ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of organizations that are not organized religions have these problematic dynamics. Like it's human. Religion takes advantage of it and has formalized a lot of it, but didn't create these dynamics.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I think people miss that a lot. We're like, oh, if you define that church as a cult, then that baseball team must be a cult. Like, yep, correct.
I'm like, yeah, if it does the same thing, like if they're forcing you to eat a certain food and, not read a certain book, and you can't do this and you can't say that, and this is limited, and if you leave no one talks to you. Like, if your baseball team is like that, then I guess it is. Like, I'm sorry if that sounds weird, but sure.
Yeah. And I think people just have that, some of that stuff's really culturally ingrained in a weird way. It's been really good. Well, I have two more questions.
Okay.
What's some of the journalism you've seen that you liked, or the reporting you've liked, or the documentaries that you've liked? What are some examples that you sort of highlight to people who are like, this is one that's done well?
Wow. I
I
don't know.
didn't.
Like,
I was just. I didn't prep these questions at all, so Dhyana is very much on the spot in this moment.
well, I mean, I can't help but like push some of the documentaries like that I know people in. Like, my friend Hoyt is in Bring Me the Beauties, that recent HBO
Yep.
documentary. And I think it was done really well. Hoyt mentioned that he wished they featured the survivors more than the cult leader, who's quite bizarre.
Yeah.
But I think they did a pretty good job of, covering the survivor stories. But yeah, I thought that was pretty good. Again, like Trust Me, the False Prophet. Christine is amazing. The person who's kind of the main person in it, she's done so much great work with these communities over the years. And I think the documentary her husband worked on, her daughter did the opening song, which is pretty cool. Like I think that went really well. And also just, I think it was done sensitively too. So I thought that was pretty good. So, as far as like recent ones, I liked, as far as just like journalism goes, like things that have been written lately, as like print. I'm just trying to think. I guess I've just been focused on documentaries. What have I read lately?
I'm always on the hunt for good independent journalism, whether it's about religion or not, because again, I think it is. This has been co-opted, so I don't like talking about mainstream media. But like, for people who've been paying attention, like I was a cultural studies minor in college. Like we've known about the capture of ideas in mainstream media since the 90s, when there were 5 major media corporations. Like this is not a new problem. This is a very old problem. And I think more people are aware of independent journalism. And I think there are some independent journalists who do a really great job, but not everybody who calls themselves an independent journalist is doing good work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really agree with that. I think there are lots of people who call themselves journalists who should not. I like, yeah, like there's a certain diligence you need to take. There are ethics, there's work you need to do, there's editing. I mean, and like some people don't, they just like throw whatever up online and call it and it's journalism, and it's not. And then there's some independent journalists who do amazing work. One thing that I really like that I'm seeing is I just in local news, there's a lot of nonprofit newsrooms kind of popping up, like funded by different organizations like the American Journalism Project, or I don't know. I have some friends who work over at the Modesto Focus, which is a kind of newish publication. It's funded by like the Stanislaus Foundation and some other like kind of local-ish nonprofits, and like they fund local journalism, and there's like a newsroom, and it's like local news, and they're like really good journalists, and they're covering stuff, and I feel like that's something that's happening more and more as our larger newspapers and stuff are kind of tanking, which is really sad. So like that, I see that as like a little bit more of a future on like a smaller level, and local news is really important. So like that is a positive. But yeah, I mean, I do agree with you about mainstream news. It's definitely gotten shaky, especially in the last year. But I also want to say, like, don't discount it. It's still there. It's still what people watch and listen to. It's still where people get their information. So, I don't know. It's a fine line. It's really, but it's really hard right now. It's really scary. I mean, publications that I used to, my go-to publications, like I've stopped subscribing to, like, ones that I still do, I'll look at and I'll be like, oh my God, was this person compliment? Like what happened? Like it can be bad. Like it's So.
Yeah, it's not a great time to have a critical thinking brain. If there are people out there who have listened and got their interest piqued or are coming up with opportunities where they get to share their story, how can they connect with you? How can they find your work? Where do they go to learn more about some of the things we touched on today?
Sure. Well, the project that I'm working on right now through the Rights and Religions Forum, which we met through, the website is called undooblivion.org. It's a work in progress right now. It's probably the best way to reach me and my most current work, if you want to. And my podcast is anywhere you get podcasts. It's called Generation Cult. The latest episode is from last year, our live show. So I don't have any recent episodes, but the stories are evergreen. I mean, they're people's personal stories. So it's not like they're breaking news and outdated or anything like that. And yeah, I think those are probably the most relevant things for me.
Yeah. And we'll have that stuff in the show notes for people so they can find it nice and easy. Follow those links. Dhyana, this has been lovely. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Yeah, thanks for talking to me.
And to all our wonderful listeners, thanks for tuning in again. We will be back next week with another new episode. Take care, everyone.